the immediate takeaway of the Jim Phillips press conference. They can talk about academics. They can talk about congressional help for the guardrails they want to put in place for student athletes being students and not employees. I know you're already triggered just by saying that. The focus is on Florida State, Clemson, and these pending lawsuits. Florida State wanting out, Clemson doing their due diligence, North Carolina somewhere in the background, keeping an eye on things. There's just a lot of off vibes. We're positive vibes only. Unfortunately for the ACC, they try to project positive vibes only, and Jim Phillips does his best to project those positive vibes. I feel like I should bring him a shirt when we go to Charlotte, and I'll give it to him so he can get those positive vibes. But as much as they try to project that, as much as they try to fight it, the vibes are certainly off, and that was evidenced by how passionate he got when talking about Florida State and Clemson and the lawsuits and having signed the grant of rights, not once, but twice.
Yeah, the quote was either you believe in what's been signed or you don't.
I'll give you that right now. But I was trying to record but couldn't because technical difficulties. But Bud Elliott, Cover 3 podcast, CBS Sports. I guess he was there with his phone, got it recorded. The video's a little off, but the audio is fine. And here's what Phillips had to say.
There are limits to what I can say, but I can state that we will fight to protect the ACC and our members for as long as it takes. We are confident in this league and that it will remain a premier conference in college athletics for the long-term future. These disputes continue to be extremely damaging, disruptive, and incredibly harmful to the league, as well as overshadowing our student athletes and the incredible successes taking place on the field and within the conference. People feel passionate about athletics, and they feel particularly passionate about college athletics at their respective schools. This passion is what makes college athletics so special, but this passion can also lead to personal attacks. John Swofford is a decent and honorable man and is widely respected in our industry. He led this conference with a steady hand for over 2 decades and did so through consensus and compromise. The fact is that every member of this conference willingly signed the grant of rights and unanimously, and quite frankly, eagerly agreed to our current television contract and the launch of the ACC network. The ACC, our collective membership and conference office, deserves better. The support for our student athletes, coaches, and programs is extraordinary, and that will continue despite these disruptions. We intend to continue to fight every...
So anyway, that was a portion of what Jim Phillips had to say during his own remarks. He wasn't prompted in saying this. This was something he just brought up. Andrea Adelson of ESPN did follow up on what he had to say, and here's his response.
We've had 6 months of disruption, and I think we've handled it incredibly well. And so I think it's important for me to lead our group in particular, not only our staff, but more importantly our schools, to compartmentalize the legal piece of what's happening and not let it distract us or take us away from what we're all trying to do, and that's provide great experiences for our student athletes, teams, coaches, put the focus back on the fields and the areas of competition. But I will tell you, there isn't a day that doesn't go by that I don't spend some time on the legal cases. I don't think that that's going to change. We're really fortunate to have hired Pearl Hauk, our first internal GC, and have great legal teams in a myriad of places. So we have proven that you have to move forward even with these types of distractions and really important issues that are part of your daily lives.
And then one more follow-up, Giglio. This is from David Hale of ESPN, who pointed out, man, this is probably the most passionate we've heard Jim Phillips defend the league or really just get at a press conference.
David Hale with ESPN. I would say that your comments to start were probably a little more forceful and emotional sounding than we've heard you largely talk about some of these issues with the lawsuits. I'm curious if you think this is something you need to change the narrative a little bit or the talking points a little bit. And if so, what is it that gives you so much optimism about the future of the league with or without Florida State and Clemson?
forceful moments deserve forceful support and leadership. And I don't know that I've changed at all, other than I stand by everything I've said from the moment, the first interview I did around the Orange Bowl on ACCN to today. This is a really important time for the conference. And either you believe in what's been signed or you don't. And so we are going to do everything we can to protect and to fight the league because I see a group of student athletes there. We now have 12,000, I think 200 student athletes. And this has been a league that started way before me 71 years ago, and will be a league that'll be around a long time after I depart. This league deserves us to take this really serious issue and to handle it appropriately. What gives me promise and conviction of it? Because I understand, I think these schools, I understand where we're going. We've made some really good adjustments. And this conference is bigger than any one school.
So again, that was Jim Phillips, ACC commissioner, doing some follow-ups to probably his most impassioned argument for the ACC. And then we're not going to get any drama, Joe. Pete Thamel, ESPN, tweeted out this morning, have been told by multiple sources that there's no expectation for Florida State or Clemson to notify the ACC they intend to leave by the August 15th deadline to depart after the upcoming year. That's the deadline to declare intentions to exit for the 25-26 year. They are both in the throes of ongoing legal battles regarding the ACC's grant of rights and withdrawal fees, so there's been little expectation of imminent movement. That sounds about right because, again, the grant of rights was signed, as Jim Phillips said, not once, but twice. And as you said last week, it's a really good deal for the ACC that John Swofford and Dean Phillips hammered out, and that's why we're here.
Yeah, listen, impassioned, sure, by comparison to other press conferences.
Don't get me wrong, man.
Really,
it's all based on what precedent, right?
It's a super low bar.
Yes.
And I really do think Jim Phillips is a well-intentioned, well-meaning, Pollyanna individual who believes in the old collegiate model. I really do. A couple of things happened here that I'll just, if you want me to spitfire here, I will. Spitball, I should say. The use of the expansion as if, it goes to the quote, we've proven, right? Is the quote, we have proven that you have to move forward. And he's talking about the lawsuits. But what he's really talking about is they added 3 schools that don't really help them football wise.
No.
I mean, SMU, I do think will be competitive, but ultimately this isn't adding Texas and Oklahoma or even UCLA, who I think is going to get just absolutely murder balled this year in the Big Ten. Okay.
As somebody joked, UCLA showed up once again in somebody's highlight reel, and now they get the ACC experience because they showed Cal and Stanford getting over on UCLA. Real quick from David Teal, an OG when it comes to ACC stuff.
This was the number I was going to get to.
Phillips says the ACC fully expects to remain top 3 nationally in conference revenue and will generate $600 million in new incremental revenue through expansion.
Yeah, and this is the first time we've seen them kind of lay it out with a number, right? So just to put this in really short overview terms, Florida State and Clemson essentially told them, listen, we're thinking about doing something. Florida State more loudly and clearly than Clemson ever did, surely.
Yeah.
And their response, as we've seen from records requests from Andrew Carter and some others, was to have Ben Sutton from Wake Forest say, we have to do something. And their answer to do something, instead of a marriage with the Pac-12, instead of that, we get this addition of 3 schools, 2 who come at a reduced cost, 1 who comes at no cost at all in SMU. And for what? $600 million. That sounds great, but it's about 2 to 3 per school, right? For the next however many years.
Yeah, and the other
thing, really not that significant. I know what you're thinking. $600 million sounds like a lot, but it's really not when you divide it by 15.
2 other quick points to that. What I'm unsure of, and had we been there today and we had time, or at least after the press conference, and I'm sure later this week when we're there at ACC kickoff, I can ask around for this kind of stuff. When they talk about the $600 million in average annual value for the ACC through the expansion, are we also taking into account something that we've talked about a lot, and go back to our old podcast if you want to find it, not to get too deep in the weeds. that when the Raycom deal comes off the books in 26-27, there's also additional money that raises up the average
about
annual
the same,
value.
2 to 3 million per school.
2 to 3 million per school, right? So you're looking at, if I want to, and if you ask certain TV insiders, because you also know that the ACC sandbags.
Yeah,
they always sandbag. So when Brett Yormark last week talks about how we're the number 3 and Big 12 people are pounding the table about, well, our new TV deal is going to put us at number 3. Yeah, slow down, guys. Like let's take that back a notch, because we understand a couple of things are about to get triggered by the ACC's deal that is actually going to bump it back up above the Big 12. Again, that's my understanding. The ACC sandbags this sort of stuff. We also don't know, because of the ACC ESPN deal, we don't know what kind of stuff might get renegotiated when they pick up the deal, the remainder of the term through 2035. And we also do not know how those success initiatives, which Jim Phillips talked about, I think he said anywhere between $20 to $25 million additional in these success initiatives. Basically, you win a ton, we'll throw you some more money. Is that going to be good enough? I mean, it might be for the North Carolinas of the world, but certainly not for Florida State, as we've discussed in the past. They just want out. They want out of the ACC, period. And there's a different conversation about how a lot of this stuff is leaking out is coming from the Florida State side.
Yeah, and so this is the first time I've heard them use this number from expansion, right? Because remember, they found fish baits in their infinite wisdom. All they had to do was read a contract. Congratulations on your ability to read. That should be a public document, and keep fighting, David McKenzie, please.
Yeah.
They read the contract that said, hey, if you add this team, you have to get to 15. You have to stay at 15 basically for the contract to remain the same. So what they did was they added these 3 schools in order to position themselves for when Florida State and Clemson either do leave or eventually find their way out, right? So this is when they tell when behind the scenes the ACC tries to tell us, Jim saved the league last year. This is what they mean. By adding these schools, they did add revenue, and they did position themselves to, if they lose Florida State and Clemson, this is the position that we're going to be in. We can still fulfill our contract with ESPN, all those good things. The other thing that stood out there at the end, of course, was David Glenn asking about their relationship with ESPN. And Jim's quote, "We have a great relationship with ESPN. I'm not just saying that."
Okay.
There was no answer there.
Quick context to the David Glenn question, by the way, in the sense that I got where he was going with it. With all this uncertainty that's going on with the ACC and the television deal and the rampant speculation about, well, I've heard that ESPN's not going to pick up the deal, blah, 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 blah. And his positioning of the Big Ten with Fox and the SEC with ESPN, and it's a Fox-Disney battle more so than it is a conference battle, stuff that you and I have talked about ad nauseum. I got where he was going with it, because if you really want to put to rest all speculation, you would announce, this contract's going all the way through 2035. The reason why I don't think Jim Phillips is doing this is, again, everything can be negotiated. And they're probably trying to find some ways to potentially just wring out even more money out of ESPN/Disney, to which I would say, I understand what you're doing. You should be doing that. But I don't know if ESPN is going to be in the position of doing that for you for a whole list of reasons. And it has nothing to do with how they value ESPN. It has a lot to do with their own bottom line and where television is going. It is in the best interest, by the way, I'll wrap my point on this. It is in the best interest for ESPN Disney to keep the ACC, because I cannot stress this enough. Bob Iger and the crew are going to be launching a streaming-only sports service, the Spulu. I think it's called Arena. I think that's what they're calling it. I forgot the name of the whole thing, but regardless, they need programming. This is why the NBA was able to get the kind of television deal they got for their second tier and third tier rights, the B and the C package on top of the A, because they understand Amazon wants in on this kind of stuff. It's all about inventory. So I do think that the ACC and ESPN will continue through 2035. The question is, how much money can you get out of them? That's the problem. And is it enough?